All right, you're welcome along to the Carlisle grounds, home of Bray Wanderers. We're here because Paddy Power have been launching their Save Our Game campaign, and as you can see behind me, they've launched it with a giant St. George's cross. It takes up the entire pitch at the Carlisle grounds. You could hide Big Ben behind it, is what I'm told. And basically the theme behind this is that every time England do something good at Euro 2020, there is a benefit for Irish football. So every time England score a goal, €10,000 will be donated to an Irish senior club. And every time Declan Rice or Jack Grealish score, they're going to double it to 20 grand, a minimum 100,000 guaranteed. If England have a great tournament, God knows how high it's going to get to. But you can get on to SaveOurGame@paddypower.com. Email in if you're involved in a senior team, you want funding, you want new showers, you want some sort of improvements, get in touch there, and they'll be making the big decisions as the tournament goes on. I'm delighted to be here at the launch with Eamon Dunphy. How are you keeping, Eamon?
I'm fine.
And Damien Delaney is here as well. How are you?
Very good.
Backing England at a major tournament, Eamon. Does it sit all right with you?
Yeah, no problem with it at all. I don't think they'll win it. I don't think they'll score 12 goals, but it's good for the grassroots of Irish soccer. 100,000 is not to be sneezed at, and it's sterling. So it's a good idea, it's a good cause, and it'll give people a bit of fun. If the pain, it'll sort of salve the pain of watching England score goals.
I think most people, because of the interest that is there in Premier League football in this country, are always intrigued by the England squad announcement as they progressed through the tournament, and maybe really came home in 2018 when they seemed like a very likeable squad. And then they get to a World Cup semi-final and the hype really starts to build, and you think, actually, we're kind of done with this now. Semi-finals as far as we want this England team to go.
Well, they always have unreal high expectations because of their history in the game. In recent times, they've rarely lived up to it. Actually, the last World Cup was one of the few times when they did. This time, I think they believe they're favourites. I don't think they are because of their defence, but they have got players like Harry Kane, Mason Mount, who are exciting, who are very, very good players, attacking players. Defensively, starting from the goalkeeper, Pickford, they've got problems.
Damien, you've been living in England in recent years. Around these major tournaments, just how insane is the hype?
Yeah, it's incredible, really, how much they get behind their country. Their patriotism, I suppose, their belief that they're going to win every tournament. I think what's really interesting about England is Gareth Southgate seems to be a nice man that has taken the edge off and provided, I suppose, a bit of unity, certainly with the press, made the team likeable again. You know, he's very good at handling all of that, whereas other managers were different, and England were always a story, and you knew there was a negative story coming at some point, either in the build-up or during the tournament or the night before their biggest game. I think Gareth seems to have kind of quelled an awful lot of that and quietened it down and got a lot of people on side. So he's deserves an awful lot of credit for that. Yeah, the English are very patriotic, and they certainly do get behind their team.
What age were you when you moved to England?
15.
I still always think it's incredible when, even it's still happening now, 15, 16-year-olds leaving Dublin off by yourself, moving to Manchester. Was any part of you, I'm sure it was your dream to play professional football. At 15, does part of you still want to stay home though?
Not really. If you're given a contract at Manchester United, it's a big opportunity. If you're given a contract with any English club, really, I think it's a way into the professional game. That's the dream for all the kids who are playing, and it was no different for me. So when I went, I wasn't sorry, I was very excited. When I reflected many years later, then I realised what I'd given up to go there, and that was quite a lot with your family and friendships and stuff like that. But you don't feel that or understand that when the first offer comes, you grab it.
Would you have been homesick?
When I came home in the summers, I would realise how much I loved being home, and it would be a little difficult to go back. Yes.
Were you very self-motivated that
Yeah.
you had that final destination in your head as to why you had to go back?
Well, you had to go back because you were a professional player. You wanted to be a professional player, and that was your obligation. It was your job. And in my case, if you leave school at 13, no one was coming along and offering me a directorship at Smurfits or anywhere like that. So it was go back and play for Millwall, or go on the dole.
Yeah.
Basically.
What was it like being a young Irish guy living in England at that stage?
Fine, I liked English people. I never felt any prejudice of them. I liked Manchester as a place. I was there for 5 years. And I liked England. Yeah. And I like England now. It's a beautiful country. And English people, I never got it. Damien, I don't know if Damien experienced it. I never experienced any hostility or prejudice because I was Irish.
What about you, Damien?
Yeah, look, I mean, when Eamon went over, things were obviously slightly different. I was over, you know, Good Friday Agreement was signed, everything was a little bit easier for us. I've never experienced any issues whatsoever. Again, like Eamon, I thoroughly enjoyed my time in the UK. I really did. I really grew to love, you know, the north when I was at Hull. You know, Yorkshire can be a lovely place. And obviously when I went to London as well, London's a fabulous city to live in. And I think everybody should experience living there once because it is such an amazing place. But I thoroughly enjoyed my time there.
It's interesting how you say, you know, this newer generation, we would assume maybe back when Eamon was there would have been issues. But I read in before you've spoken about, you know, wearing a black armband after Bloody Sunday and not having had any hassle around that at all. Yet in the modern times we see with James McLean what he gets for refusing to wear the poppy. That actually, while we look back and think those are the bad old days, maybe these are the bad old days.
Well, I certainly didn't experience it. James has taken a very strong stand. The poppy is a very emotive thing for English people. It's remembering the war dead, particularly of the First World War. And it's very emotive, it's very real. They made huge sacrifices. And I suppose there aren't many families in England that weren't touched by the wars. So what James is doing in choosing not to wear the poppy is much more provocative from an English point of view. What I was doing was a one-off, and I think even English people understood very quickly that shooting innocent people is wrong. So
I guess James McLean would, and has, when he's explained his stance, would also go back to Bloody Sunday and him growing up in Craigan in Derry, and the legacy of that as to why it's important for him to make that stand.
Oh,
as well.
he has every right to do what he's doing. But what I'm trying to say to you is that the thing that his protest revolves around is something hugely emotive for English people. And there's a ceremony every year to remember the war dead, lay a wreath in the cenotaph. All of that is very much a part of England's history and its contemporary culture. I wasn't challenging anything like that. What he's doing is very challenging for people, and I admire his courage and his fortitude. He's doing what he believes in, although I have to say personally, I wouldn't have any problem wearing poppy if I was living in England.
Right.
But his choice is his choice, and he's entitled to do what he does, and he has paid a heavy price for it. There's no doubt about that.
When you turned up at training and at a match the week after Bloody Sunday with a black armband, were teammates, management, were they asking questions? Were they intrigued?
Not really. I explained it on the first day, which was the Monday after Bloody Sunday.
Right.
And it was the biggest story, you know, of all time that day in England. The paratroopers, a renowned English regiment and all of that stuff. I said, look guys, your paratroopers murdered 30-something people, and this is my way of reminding you that you can't do that and expect to get away with it. And the guy said, fine. And Millwall was a pretty hot place for, supporting the army and supporting lots of things in Millwall. There was a fascist history back there in that part of London, East End. He didn't get a peep out of the crowd. No problem. No, I think they understood that something wrong had been done by their people, by their troops. For whatever reason, they left me alone.
You weren't, I don't want to say you weren't supported by your teammates, but you were the only one at that stage.
I wasn't supported by the other Irish players in England because I rang them all up.
And what did they say?
No. Are you mad?
Do you have at that age, are you having an educated debate with them about why you're doing it and why you feel they should do it?
Well, I didn't need to explain to them. I said, look, guys, this is a chance for us to show solidarity with the people of Derry. That's all it was, and we should take it. And you're high profile, you're Irish, and a lot of them were always banging on about they love their country, and one or two of them maybe going to Gaelic matches in Croke Park and being super Irishmen. But when push came to shove, none of them did it, no.
That's something that James McLean has spoken about a lot recently, Damien, the lack of support from teammates. And we had David Myler on the show around James McLean recently, talking of being very honest that it's just not worth the hassle. Was that how he looked at it, rightly or wrongly? And now that he's retired, maybe he looks at it in a bit more in depth. When you were playing and this was becoming a big topic, was it something you thought about?
Yeah, and I think just touching on what Eamon said there, I think social media plays a huge part in it, and I think when Eamon did it, it was a story and it would be in the newspapers, but it wasn't amplified, or it wasn't a binary type thing where it was, Eamon is against certain things and it gets overhyped. I think James has been a victim of that. Me, myself personally, I always wore the poppy. I always viewed myself as a guest in the United Kingdom, and I always wanted to adhere to their and be respectful of their traditions. Now you can say that they weren't respectful for us, and certainly James lived that. I grew up in Cork. We were a long way from the Troubles. James grew up in the heart of it, so I would never try to understand or put myself in James's place. The patriotism he must feel, or the family members that he had affected by it. I never had that. We saw it on the news pretty much like everybody else. So I never had that strong urge to do what James done. I agree, he certainly has a right to do that, and I suppose there's the argument to be made that the British fought in those wars for that freedom to do that. They fought against the very principle of, silencing people or putting people in a certain place. So it's a tough issue, but if James feels strongly enough about it, he stood by his principles, and I admire him for that.
Yeah, it is one of the difficulties for James McLean, and I guess a lot of people in Derry. As Damien said, he grows up in Cork, and Derry and the Troubles felt like a world away. It's something that you struggle to relate to. It's
a different culture. I mean, they were living with an occupying army, and we haven't, in the south, had to do that. So it's a different issue for James than it is for Damien or for me.
Did you ever talk to him about it, Damien?
No, not really. Never really mentioned. But I'm pretty sure he has given his account over the years as to why it is. I've read his bits about it, and I fully respect his choice. He's brought an untold amount of attention and negativity that almost certainly has impacted his playing career. I don't care who you are, you can't go to every ground in the UK and be berated. I mean, everyone can be berated for footballing reasons. It's almost acceptable, and you live with it, it's part of the job, and you're primed for that. But for him to get the abuse that he gets, not just
death threats, bullets in the post, are the sort of things that quite often come out like sound bites. But then you have to think about living in his house and his wife and his children, and that actually happens when you wake up in the morning.
But I'm talking about from a footballing point of view, the attention he's put on his football, to show up in a warm-up of a game, and for you to be warming up, trying to get your head focused, trying to get right, and all you're hearing is non-footballing stuff. That's what I'm saying. It has affected his career, has to have. He's still had an amazing career, and he's done really, really well. But I suppose the negativity and emotions that it's brought from must have been difficult.
The bravery then, Eamon, to take that stand and to make that sacrifice for what he truly believes in. Maybe it's more relevant in that modern dressing room. Would a modern dressing room be a place where there's a lot of pressure actually to keep quiet about your beliefs?
No, I think football nowadays is almost certainly an open environment. You know, we all have the T-shirts, we all attend clubs initiatives for inclusivity and all these bits and pieces. So I think it's probably easier than in Eamon's age. I don't know, but I would assume so. I think there was always in the 80s, there was always this kind of silence mentality. If you didn't like something, just shut up and deal with it. And that's why an awful lot of things went on. But no, there's definitely a more easier.
Eamon, you're not on our television screens every week anymore, unfortunately, but we still hear you, still have your podcast, and likewise we still hear John Giles on with us on Off the Ball every week, so you're still giving your view, but I don't know if it gets to the same mass audience that it once did. I'm sure you can tell me the figures from the podcast as to how well it's doing, but do you miss being front and centre around these big tournaments?
I don't know. I did it for 40 years. I enjoyed it, doing it with the people I was doing it with. It's over. So I don't miss it. No, I like to sit and watch the matches. I can talk to John on the phone or Liam, and I don't miss it at all. No.
Yeah, a lot of people around this time, if you Google Eamon Dunphy or John Giles at a panel, you find yourself going down a YouTube wormhole of 3 hours of just brilliance. That the match is irrelevant. Quite often you're wondering what game it is exactly you're talking about, yet still you can watch it 5, 10, 20 years later and it's entertaining. You must look back with a lot of pride of what you did for punditry and how transformed punditry, certainly in this country, and I think more and more probably it's been reflected a bit more in the UK as well. Well,
I mean, you had two of our greatest players, of anybody's greatest players, John Giles and Liam Brady, both of whom are highly intelligent, are very articulate, can express themselves, and they know their football. And I was a journalist really at that stage when I started. And I didn't have the gifts that they had as a footballer, but I knew what a story was, and I knew what the job was. The job of an analyst on television or radio is to bring their expertise, their experience of football, to have knowledge of what they're watching and what the salient points and features are, and then to have the ability to express yourself, and finally and crucially to tell it as you see it, and that way an audience of people who love football as much as you do can engage with you. They can disagree or agree, but they're getting something that's real, authentic, and that's the way analysis should work. And at its best, that's the way analysis does work. If you watch, for example, Roy Keane now and Graham Souness, say, and Keane will be on for the Euros. You know, whatever you think about Roy Keane and his Jekyll and Hyde personality, as a pundit, he is going to tell you what he's watching and what he's seeing, and you're going to get it straight. And, you know, that's what he's there to do.
Yeah. Damien knows all about getting it straight from Roy Keane, I think.
Yeah, well, I think everybody does.
Yeah, at this stage.
We fell off the chair there.
But Keane as a pundit is divisive as well because of the new punditry where there are so many stats available, there's so much information, and as you say, he seems to rock up, he has ignored the stats and he goes and he watches the match and, as you say, gives his opinion, where a million different people online can say, well, actually the expected goals in that game was this, so Roy, you're wrong.
Yeah, well, I think there's lies, damn lies, and statistics, and a lot of people who major on statistics in football analysis use statistics to worm their way in and to find a role because they don't know anything about the game.
Who's your audience then? Who did you see as your audience? Was it the
audience,
the everyman, or?
Well, it's the intelligent viewer who likes football, and you know, intelligent about football, real people. That's the audience, and you have to. People love their football, and I think the best way to do it is straightforward. You don't need an IQ of 170 You just need to love your football, to be curious about it. And when I'm watching rugby or golf, I love to hear, say, on golf, Paul McGinley. He's really very, very good. And I hate to hear some of the other Sky pundits because they're useless. And they're talking in platitudes. They're bland.
McGinley'd use a lot of stats, though.
He does. I'm not saying, but he knows he's using them to illustrate something that's real. And golf is a very stats-driven game, okay? Strokes gained off the tee and all of that, putting stats. They're important. Soccer isn't like that. It's a different game.
You're talking about golf like a man like myself who likes to bet on golf and is well aware of strokes gained off the tee, strokes gained putting, and exactly where it fits in.
McGinley is interesting, particularly on Rory McIlroy. He's a great player. He's won 4 majors, a very gifted man. And McGinley's take on why McIlroy is struggling and the stats he uses to back it up is fascinating. But that's not the same. You can't apply the same statistical analysis to a game of soccer.
The difficulty, I guess, for McGinley is that golf is such a close sport that he's there at the tournaments that opinion of Rory McIlroy is maybe appreciated by a lot of people.
He's one of the few guys who tries to nearly tell it as it is, which is a big improvement on most of them, isn't it, Damien?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Some of them make me tear my hair out. The Sky pundits, I won't name them.
Can leave it to your imagination. What about Damien Delaney as a pundit?
He's excellent. He's excellent. He's articulate. He knows his football. And like all Cork people, he can express himself. He's very, very, very good. He's the young, new generation. And, you know, when I watch him on Virgin, it's a pleasure.
Thank you, Eamon.
No, I mean it. If I was running the show, you'd be wherever I could get you into whatever I was doing, because you know your stuff, you can express yourself, which is hugely important, and you're honest. And now, that's the kind of thing that has consequences if you're not working for the right boss. You need if you want to be good at what you're doing, you need a boss who will support you when your opinions are wrong. And I was wrong about, say, Ronaldo, right? They didn't sack me.
Yeah.
I was badly wrong. They still didn't sack me. Could not have been wronger. And they still didn't sack me. But I put my hands up, and time proved that it was a sackable offence. But they didn't do it.
Was it a sackable offence? Because that was your take at that time.
No, yeah, but that was my take at that time. He was playing for Manchester United. I think John Giles roughly agreed with me. He wouldn't have expressed it as flamboyantly. He wouldn't have called him a show pony or a, you know. It was easy to form an impression of Ronaldo when he was young. As flash, as a bit of a coward, as someone who was more interested in being a show pony than getting results. And it was a completely false analysis of Ronaldo.
No,
you
but
worked like
time has proven that, Eamon.
Yes.
At the time of what you said, there was understanding what you meant. It wasn't like, if you said that when he was at Real Madrid, then that's a sackable offence.
Yeah.
But the time you said it, it was borderline.
Yeah, but the thing is, I have a way of expressing myself.
There's no going back from.
It's flamboyant. No, but the other thing is that the faith of Alex Ferguson had in it. The way he scored so many goals, the fitness levels, the practice, and I only learned that about him later. And mine was it was a big mistake. He was a big player in the game, and as soon as I realised I'd made a mistake, I said, "Look, big mistake.
Right.
Apology." Now, you have to put that in the scales against other things where I may have been right.
People rarely remember them, though, or go back to them.
Oh, I don't mind. As long as people are... You want people to engage with the work you're doing.
Yeah.
And people will engage if they feel you're being honest and you're not being stupid or you're not being, you know, dishonest.
So would you like, and would you have liked back then, if you were out for a drink and people would engage you in the pub about something you've said? Would it show you that you're making your mark?
No, I think the main thing is, in my experience, the audience numbers will show.
Right.
And if you're doing your stuff, the audience will be there. If they have a choice and they don't like what you're doing, they'll go elsewhere. You're there really to enhance the experience of a game for the audience. You're not there. You're not very important in the whole thing. What's important is what's happening on the pitch. But you're there to enhance. If I'm at home tonight watching golf, I want to listen to Paul McGinley. Or if I'm watching horse racing, I want to listen to, Ruby Walsh, who's a really good analyst. So you want the best, the most intelligent guys, and you lap it up. What's really going on, guys? Who's good, who's bad?
Yeah.
And that's all you do.
You got too good, though. You were bigger than the game sometimes, it felt like.
Well, it shouldn't have been that way. I mean, you had two great players who were very good at expressing themselves and knew football inside out. You couldn't sit beside those two guys and not be fascinated by their take on what was going on. Now, my role was slightly different.
Provocateur.
Well, I was kind of I was different in the way I expressed myself. I was blunter, sometimes funnier, and sometimes, in the case of Ronaldo, or one or two others, off the wall.
Yeah.
But you need a bit of madness.
Ronaldo is a good example, Damien, of the difficulty, maybe even more so for modern punditry, where everything is now recorded, everything is online, promoted online, and if you've said something 6 months ago, someone will bring it back. And, you've been very critical, say, of Manchester United and Ole Gunnar Solskjaer and the progress or the lack of progress that you feel they've made. If they go on and win the league next season, they may do it by signing Erling Haaland, Harry Kane. That's going to come back, and if you go online, your life's going to be a bit of a nightmare.
No, not particularly. I think the point at the time stands. I think Manchester United, the original point, a lot of things got lost in what went on, but the original point is that I felt that Ole Gunnar Solskjaer is not the man to get Manchester United back to their former glories. I never said that Ole Gunnar Solskjaer would get Manchester United relegated, and anytime Man United won a game, yourselves were only too happy to say, well, what about this, Even when they hit the front in January, I did a thing with Joe, and I said, well, it's January. And I was right, I don't think he's the guy. I just don't see it in him. He's not an elite level manager. And I think even if you gave Erling Haaland, Jadon Sancho, give him 5 players.
Yeah.
Certainly that would move back. That team could manage itself to a certain level. But when it gets to the crunch, what Tuchel does, the real, finer points was the one that gets you to Champions Leagues, will get you over the line in the Premier League, Manchester United will undoubtedly do well next year because they're going to spend money. But I said I still don't believe, and I stand by it, and listen, if I'm incorrect, I'm incorrect, but I still don't think that Manchester United under Solskjaer are going to get to the level that City are at and Liverpool were at last year. Because the points target in the Premier League now is 95 plus points. Manchester United finished with 66, 74. They're 30 points short. Where are they making that up? It's not in players. Managers have to play a role too. A lot of his interviews over the season with Manchester United, at one point before the FA Cup game at Leicester, he did an interview. He said, I don't judge my progress on winning a trophy. I don't need to win a trophy. And I thought, that manager of Manchester United is now saying that he doesn't need to win a trophy. Manchester United are only about trophies. And that mentality he has, when they hit the front in January 25th, they had about 4 0-0s in a row. Ordinarily, Manchester United hit the front in January, the foot went down, like Manchester City did, and they opened up the gap and they ram it down everyone else's throat, and the league is over. You could sense there was a vulnerability in Solskjaer when he hit the front. He didn't know how to handle it really. And that's why I don't think he's an elite level manager. He might get there, but it's going to take him a number of years to learn, and learning at Manchester United is not the place to be. The likes of Conte that are out there now, I just think Manchester United would be... It'd be strange for him not to go and get him. If you wanted a guy like Klopp that went in at Liverpool to grab the club by the scruff of the neck and drag it, and a guy that would be strong with the owners, a guy that's going to sit down with the owners and say, hey, I need X, Y and Z, give me that and I'll get you this. That's what they need right now, and I think Conte is the personality that Manchester United need.
What pundits do you look at the moment and admire and maybe take something from?
I like listening to Brian. Brian has a nice way of saying things, and I like Niall as well. I think Niall has some interesting takes as well. But I think Brian, coming from his background of being a manager, and he sees problems differently than I would see. So sometimes I hear Brian speaking, and I do think to myself, I didn't think about it like that, because I have a certain way of looking at things, whereas Brian comes from another angle. So I do enjoy listening to Brian. And there's a couple of other lads around now, I enjoy listening to yourselves and off the ball and things.
We're not experts,
I'm not experts, but I like people to offer a different point of view. I see the world a certain way, and I try to move around. But sometimes when somebody points something out that you missed, I think that's an education. You feel happy. I love it when someone says to me, well, what about this? And yourselves and Joe often say that to me with questions when I come on a point. And in my head I go, oh yeah, actually I didn't quite think. And I've learned something, and I like that, So I would never be so strong to think that I see things a certain way, and that's the way the world is. If somebody points out something that I missed, I'm only too happy to go along with it.
I know from the amount of times you walked past me at Selhurst Park and blanked me when I'd be trying to get you for a post-match interview that media didn't play a big part of your life when you were a player. Did criticism ever get back to you? Did it ever sting you? Or did you see players in that modern dressing room who would be affected by what would be said on Monday Night Football?
Just to tidy up your point there, the reason I was never interested in media is my sole mentality was, everything I did in my life, is it going to help me win the game on a Saturday? That was anything I did in my life was followed with the question, is this going to help you for Saturday? And if the answer wasn't a definite yes, I didn't do it. And I always felt that doing media opened up a channel of communications and a spotlight possibly that might hinder you. Because anything that came into my world that was negative, or if I'm getting phone calls saying, oh, you can't believe you said this, and I could be quite emotional after games sometimes. So if you ask me a direct question, I'll give you a direct answer, and that might not be the best thing for me or the team. So that tidies that up. But yes, modern players love. I've seen lads come in after the game, and before the manager got in the change room, the Twitter is out. It's an incredible phenomenon to see. Before you'd have a stereo and music would be playing. No, there's no music in the change room. Everyone has their own headphones on and the phones. And I was right around that time, and I used to always look at players and think, are you listening to music or are you on your phone? And you'd walk by a guy and he'd be on social media. Right. I'm talking now, you're out for a warm at 2:10. I'm talking 2 minutes past 2. The headphones on and then the thing. And I'm like, that can't be good. You shouldn't be, and I see fellas on Twitter after a game, 2 or 3 minutes after a game, what are the fans saying about me? And that's kind of moulding their opinion on how they played. When in reality, you should just go home and sit down and analyse it yourself. And if you trust yourself and you're honest with yourself, you'll come up with a good analysis of yourself. So that has come into it. It's something I really struggled with. The access that media were then given to training grounds. I was always a believer in the sanctity of a training ground. That's the way I was brought up. That once you were in the training ground, that was your sanctuary, that was your world. Nothing got in there. So now all of a sudden you're in training and there's drones overhead, there's 20, 30 people around. When that opened up for me, I found it difficult. Flying the wall documentaries, I found that really difficult and I railed against that for a number of years, and I found I was getting nowhere, and I found that the times had changed, and I just had to accept it, and I did.
Harder to get to know the true player then that's your teammate, because I guess there's always a bit of an act if there's cameras around.
Yeah, and I definitely felt that with the flying the wall stuff, and I've been involved in a couple of teams like that. And I think that when you're a training ground, the physio room is the hub. It's like the coffee shop, right. You know what I mean? Lads are going in, getting strap-ins, and it is like the meeting point, right? And I always found that when you're walking into a room and you're thinking, are they in there? And you don't feel comfortable in your own environment, you won't be yourself with your teammates. And that was something I struggled with. But no, it's part and parcel of it. And I probably, if I was playing now, I would have to learn how to deal with that better than what I did.
It does feel, Eamon, in the last week, even with what's happened with Naomi Osaka, sports journalism is entering maybe a difficult phase, whereby Naomi Osaka clearly has her own issues with mental health, but they've ended up being wrapped around press conferences and the negativity that comes from press conferences, and a sense that maybe journalists shouldn't be asking those sort of questions, of putting a pressure on. Paul Kimmage is writing again today in the Sunday Independent that the journalist's job is to ask the difficult question almost regardless of the impact it has on the athlete. What's your take on it?
Well, the question is timing, Nathan. There's a time. And when you come off a tennis court, football pitch, golf course, you're emotional. It's not the right time And when managers come in, as they're obliged to do by contract, to give interviews, they're meaningless pap. I mean, they rarely say anything interesting. So I think in the case of players, I think they have to be fair with their time with the media, but I don't think immediately after the game is the time. And that was the issue with tennis player. Press conferences immediately after she come off court. You're in no condition emotionally because you haven't processed what's happened for yourself, and you can't do it when you're 10 minutes or even earlier.
But I'd echo that, because in the Premier League now, my last couple of years, when you come off the pitch, you're taken straight to do the TV before you go back in the changing room.
Yeah.
So you go and do a TV interview, and you go in, you've missed what the manager said. So often, if you're sitting in the changing room, you want to listen to your manager because he might square something for you. He might tell you how he saw the game, or he might say, "Hey, listen, if anyone asks in the press, we're fucking delighted." I think you're all useless, but you know, if anyone asks, so a player is now going in without any guidance from the changing room and giving an interview, and then he comes in afterwards, and everyone's kind of getting showered.
Yeah.
And the manager the same. So sorry.
No, it's there's a time and a place, and the media is important because it allows fans of the game to engage with what's happening. But there's a time and a place for interviews, and I think when you've come off a 5-set, 3-set match or off a golf course and you've just had something really bad happen to you, that's not the time.
Yeah, I guess it's as long as the other access is still there away from that at a more appropriate time. And like, unfortunately, we see already this week, I think it's Irish rowing have banned all their rowers from talking to the media ahead of the Olympics because of mental health concerns. Whereas,
I went and covered a couple of Super Bowls as a journalist, and the Americans in Super Bowl week allocate a whole day for the media. You go to the stadium, each player and the head coach and all the other coaches are sitting in their place, and you go around and they answer anything you ask, you get an answer. I mean, I covered San Francisco 49ers. It was a long time ago now. Joe Montana was the quarterback, and me and another journalist ended up in his bedroom. And he said, "Come up, have a beer." We sat there for 2 hours. This was like unbelievable stuff, but they have a different way of doing things.
Are you sitting there for the full 2 hours taking notes?
No, we were just
the background.
There was an English guy with me, a well-known journalist who knew Montana.
Right.
But the thing was, his attitude to the media was, that's part of my job.
Yeah.
Whereas his equivalent in English soccer, I mean, John Giles was notorious. I know you've interviewed John a lot, but when John was playing, he hated journalists. I won't tell you what he said about them. But then, of course, he ended up being a media personality himself.
Yeah.
But the media has a place, and all that needs to be worked out is the structure that is beneficial for the media and also protects players who, aren't in emotional good health.
Yeah. Have you got to a stage yet where you're getting feedback from former teammates about things you've said about them?
Not really, no. I think myself and Keith Andrews had a couple of rocky moments, all right. But no, listen, not really, no. I don't really speak to many ex-players anyway, so not particularly, no.
All the guys I played with are dead now.
What I love when I'm talking to John Giles, and you ring him any day and he's watched everything. He still has that love, no matter what it is.
Yep.
When every Premier League game has been shown for the last year, he's sitting down watching them all. Do you have that love still for it?
I do, yeah. He's watching them because he's got to do the Stand podcast with me.
Thursday nights and off the ball end.
No, he's John loves his football. I do too. I must admit that there have been times in recent months when there's a game on every night. I wasn't mad to get up and watch Burnley Sheffield United. In fact, I gave it a miss. You'd get a bit picky, and I got a bit picky.
Yeah.
But you have to do your job, and if you're not watching football enough, particularly the important teams, then you're not doing your job, and that's no good.
Are you excited about the Euros then?
Yes.
Does Ireland not being there impact on your enjoyment?
Well, obviously, if Ireland are there, it gives it an edge,
Yeah.
and it's, you know, delightful. Even the last Euros, we had a moment against Italy, and no, of course it matters when Ireland aren't there, and it's sad that we're not there. But
What do you make of the first 12 games for Stephen Kenny?
Well, I believe in what Stephen is trying to do. I was delighted when he got the job. I think he's been extremely unlucky on a number of fronts, injuries. Seamus Coleman, for example, Aaron Connolly, for example, Shane Duffy and his whole thing at Celtic. But the COVID, playing in empty stadiums, nothing has gone right for him. And the inability to score, which is a curse. It wasn't as if we were giving many goals away, but we, you know, now we scored 4 against Andorra, and that could have a huge effect on the confidence of the forward players in particular. And Troy Parrott showed a lot of character to get the 2 goals he got the other night, and particularly the first goal. You know, nothing was happening for us. The team was in need, and he stepped up to the plate. He could have been as a striker hiding, and a lot of them would have been, but he didn't. He stepped up and did so. So I think Stephen has a long-term project. He knows these players. He worked with many of them at under 21 level. Troy Parrott's only 19, incidentally. So I believe that Trapattoni and Martin O'Neill weren't good for Irish soccer. I thought in particular that Trapattoni would be, but he didn't believe in our players, and neither did O'Neill and Keane. So I think we need someone who knows all our players, which wasn't true of the previous managers, knows the grassroots of the game in this country, knows who's playing well and who's got promise at underage level, which Stephen does, and wants to play the game the way it's meant to be played. So I think it would be a positive appointment in the long run.
Yeah. International football could be a tough watch at times, but when you think of that night in Lille and Robbie Brady's goal, it's all worthwhile, and it's such a shame we won't have a moment like that over the next 4 or 5 weeks. Just on the tournament then, Damien, and England, which will be a big focus for Ireland, not just because of the players there, but because they're favourites going into it. You touched on Gareth Southgate there. Watching his press conference yesterday and talking about the players taking the knee and how him as a 50-year-old white man trying to explain why 20-year-old black men should or shouldn't do this. He seems to have the emotional intelligence and the emotional reach for that group of players that you sort of feel they are going to be very much together in this tournament in a way that maybe England squads haven't been previously. I
agree with that, yeah. I think he diffused it. It's an awkward issue. I think, you know, he has to juggle, you know, being on the right side of this, you know, Black Lives Matter and the mood of the nation, because obviously if they're getting booed at the Riverside, there is a certain element in England that don't want this, not because they're racist. There's a whole other chapter going on there about why they're booing the knee being taken, that they believe it's a political movement and whatever. So it's a delicate job for him, and I thought he did really well yesterday in the press conference to really kind of diffuse that and try and keep the nation, because he knows that if they are to win this, they have to have the whole nation behind them. So he doesn't want to lose that, but at the same point he has his responsibilities as well. So you know, he's a great manager. I think he's done a fantastic job so far with England. When you say they're favourites, I think the British media have made them favourites. I'm not sure they're favourites anywhere else.
Paddy Power have made them favourites.
Yeah, see, I can't see them winning it. I think.
Why?
I think defensively they're weak. I think, you know, to win a major tournament, you're going to have to suck it up and soak up pressure at some point. The kitchen sink is coming from someone, and I don't think they're there to stand up to that. I think they're good in attack, but I think there's better teams. When you look around with France, I think they're stacked with Benzema coming back in now as well. They're stacked with world-class talent as well, but also they're pretty solid defensively, and of course they've got Kante, who's the equivalent of 2 midfield players. So I think France are probably best placed for me.
Eamon?
I agree with almost all of that. I don't think England have a good enough defence. A very poor goalkeeper, which is almost madness playing him. But there he is. Maguire coming back from injury with Stones. That doesn't inspire confidence at the heart of their defence. I think Portugal, France definitely. The France have a hard draw. It really is tough, but they have a really top team. Full of great attacking players. Griezmann, Benzema, Mbappe, good luck with that. If you're England, you know, they won't be mapped against a team of that quality.
Yeah.
But there is great optimism there. They have some good young players. Mason Mount is immediately springs to mind. Harry Kane, of course. But you have to defend as well. And I'm not sure that the goalkeeper or the central defensive partnership will work.
Lads, it's been great to talk to you. I'd love to see a proper Damien Delaney Eamon Dunphy panel sometime, going at it, hammer and tongs. Just to take him down a peg or two.
Yeah.
We've been here at the Carlisle grounds in Bray. Paddy Power have been launching their Save Our Game promotion, which is going to run through the next few months. You'll hear a lot about it on Off the Ball. Every time England score at the Euros, 10 grand goes to Irish football, 20 grand if it's Declan Rice or Jack Grealish, a minimum of 100 grand. So if you're involved in a team, a senior team around the country, you can email saveourgame@paddypower.com, and that money's going to be divvied out over the course of the summer. So if you are a team in need and you want some new facilities or you need a little bit of a helping hand, do get in touch. Damien, Eamon, pleasure.
Pleasure. Thanks very much, Nathan.